Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you again for stopping by. It's deeply appreciated. Fantastic article in the Financial Times, headlined Russia, Vladimir Putin's Pivot to Africa. It's a long read, so I'll just read clips from it, but it's well worth reading in full. It's on rich wrap-ups. As protests raged in Zimbabwe's cities last week, with police firing live ammunition at crowds who barricaded roads with burning tires, the target of their anger was 8,000 kilometers away. President Mr Mnangagwa, who had sparked the unrest by raising fuel prices amid an economic crisis in the southern African country, was instead strolling through the Kremlin for talks with President Vladimir Putin, the first of what Moscow hopes will be many visits by African leaders this year. From Algeria to Uganda, Russia is building influence in Africa, lending support to embattled strongmen, taking on natural resource projects in conflict-racked states, and positioning itself as a new power broker without the baggage of former colonial powers. As well as warm words from Mr. Putin, Mr. Mnangagwa left Moscow with something more tangible: agreements for Russian investment in Zambia's diamond industry, a fertilizer supply contract, and 2 financing deals worth $267 million. Apparently, just the hiring of his jet cost $27 million. While lacking the financial firepower of China or the long-standing trade relations of former colonial powers, Russia has sought to use its military exports, security apparatus, and state-controlled natural resource companies to gain footholds across the continent. Across Africa, Moscow has deployed teams of military instructors to train elite presidential guards, send armed shipments, and assisted shaky autocrats with election strategies. Remember that. We've spoken about that. They helped Donald Trump. So, of course, that is a significant calling card. Christian Malanga, an opposition politician in the DR Congo, where Moscow has hailed Felix Tshisekedi as the winner of the recent presidential election, despite evidence of voting fraud. He got about 15% of the vote, would you believe? It's Kafkaesque. Says Russia was building an old Soviet ties. It's the Cold War 2.0, he says, adding that Russia complemented China in what he saw as a strategy to challenge Western influence. China is the money, Russia is the muscle, he said. Russia has been re-evaluating its diplomatic policy since the Western sanctions came into effect. Moscow realized it needed new partners. Western analysts, myself included, only really woke up to this at the sudden appearance of significant clusters of Russian armed men, says Alex Vines, head of the Africa program at the Chatham House think tank in London. It was like, my God, what have we missed, and why have we missed this? It's pure Franc Afrique. Change the flag and you have the same methodology, he adds. In 2017, Russia's trade with Africa rose 26% to $17.4 billion. Between 2013 and 2017, Russia supplied 39% of Africa's imported arms, compared with 17% from China and 11% from the US. Read this. In 2014, Zimbabwe, and I never knew about this, concluded an arms for platinum deal with Russia worth a reported $3 billion, bypassing both a European arms embargo and its lack of hard currency to swap rights to the Darwindale platinum concession for the provision of an undisclosed number of MiG-35 fighter jets. What are they going to use those for? Rosatom, the state-run nuclear monopoly, is working in Zambia and Rwanda. Russian geologists are active in Madagascar, Algeria, Libya, and Ghana. Rosneft is developing oil and gas fields in Egypt, Mozambique, and Algeria. Lukoil has projects in Nigeria, Ghana, and Cameroon. Moscow and Beijing are clearly competitors over natural resources, but the Russians will not beat China in Africa. It is minor league in comparison. This is Mr. Vines. But with the US retreat, there is space for Moscow to be mischievous. It is about optics and, to a certain extent, smoke and mirrors to present itself as a global power, he adds. The Russians are looking for areas where they can unnerve Western opponents, some of whom are truly shocked at what is happening. Russia never had a very strong presence in South Africa until Zuma got into power, says Lumkile Mondi. Through him, they were to get in and gain control. Given that historically the Anglo-American countries have been our partners, then the BRICS countries came in and Russia wanted a piece of the pie. How Lourenço, Angola's president, studied at the elite Lenin Political Military Academy in the late 1970s. Russian-African relations have a rich history, while unlike the former global powers, Russia has not tainted itself with the crimes of slavery and colonialism, the Russian Foreign Ministry says in a statement. In the middle of the last century, our country actively contributed to the achievement of national independence and sovereignty of African countries. Many African countries are well aware of this. In Africa, they present themselves as mediators, as honest brokers, says one Western diplomat. You see a common thread across Angola, DRC, Mozambique. It's obvious they're repeating their successful Middle East strategy and seeking to mine the Soviet legacy. We do not interfere with elections, Mr. Lavrov said. The Congolese people can handle this on their own, and it is important not to impose this or that agreement as is normally done by France, the US, and other former colonial powers. Talking about how everyone is turning to Russia post-Assad, Kabila, all the actors like him are turning back to Russia. We've seen that in Venezuela and with Assad in Syria, and that's basically what African leaders are looking for today. Constitutions are no dogma, Bible or Quran, said Ambassador Alexander Bragadze. Guinea needs you today, and as the popular Russian saying goes, you don't change horses at a river crossing. Zimbabwe is under the yoke of sanctions imposed by Western countries, Mr. Mnangagwa told Mr. Putin in the Kremlin. However, through these days of isolation, you, Russia, have remained with us as a reliable partner, he said. I take you back to an article I wrote on the 5th of December 2016 about Putin. I called him an information master. I said his adversaries are his information victims. That speaks to the electoral help that they can give. In December 2016, I said, at this moment, President Putin has Fortress Europe surrounded, which I still think he does. The intellectual father of the new zeitgeist that propelled Brexit, Le Pen, the five-star movement in Italy, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands is Vladimir Putin. In the Middle East, it is Putin who's calling the shots. And in a quite delicious irony, it looks like he has pocketed OPEC as well. October 2015, at the time when he made his speech at UNGA, I called him a geopolitical grandmaster. Let us return to UNGA, where Putin set out his stall, and I quote, I cannot help asking those who have caused the situation, do you now realize what you've done? Within 24 hours of delivering that speech, Russia instructed that the US should vacate Syrian airspace. This message was not delivered to Ashton Carter by his Russian counterpart Shoigu. The speed of execution confirms that Russia is once again a geopolitical actor that will have to be considered. It is a breathtaking rebound. Europe surrounded, Trump helped into office, Middle East back as a player, and now making his move on Africa. It's quite incredible. In this photograph, residents are seen walking past one of the apartment towers that house Frigua refinery staff in Guinea, where the Russian aluminium group Rusal mines bauxite. Speculation swirled over an attempt by members of Mr Mnangagwa's Zanu-PF party to oust him from office. Mnangagwa loyalists in the ruling party said unnamed opponents had failed to muster the numbers needed to unseat him in an impeachment motion. They threatened to kill me and my family. The plot is foiled. They lack numbers for impeachment. Terence Mkupe, another loyalist Zanu-PF MP, said, "Come get me and do as you please, but my president is not going anywhere." God help us. Over the weekend, my article was about how it was the end game in Harare, in Khartoum, and in Kinshasa. And I said the point I'm seeking to make is that there is a correlation between high inflation and revolutionary conditions. A further dive into the inflation data and you will note some serious non-linear inflation spikes. In Bashir's Sudan, inflation rose to 72.94% in December. In Zimbabwe, inflation clocked 42.1% in December. DR Congo is somewhere around 25%, but data is difficult to gather, as you would expect. I then was referencing Yuval Noah Harari, speaking about money. In other words, money isn't a material reality. It is a psychological construct. It works by converting matter into mind. Andy Warhol has converted a lot of matter into mind. $100 bills, very famous. It was 43.8 million at Sotheby's when it was sold. Going back to Yuval, money is accordingly a system of mutual trust, and not just any system of mutual trust. Money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. Cowrie shells and dollars have value only in our common imagination. Their worth is not inherent in the chemical structure of the shells and paper, or their color, or their shape. In other words, money isn't a material reality. It is a psychological construct. It works by converting matter into mind. Indeed, Bitcoin converted matter into mind, all lost here. Samm Farai Monro told The Guardian the government can switch off the internet, but not the frustration of millions of people. And this is the point. Whether it's DR Congo, whether it's Sudan, wherever you care to look. Kapuscinski said the choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. I then quoted a Sudanese revolutionary song, "We sing in our prison as you tremble in your castle." Indeed, that is the situation now. I found a really great documentary from BBC Africa about Congo, A Journey to the Heart of Africa. It was really interesting because my daughter, who's 12, was sitting an entrance exam, and she said, "Dad, you won't believe it, but the poem, 'We Are the Hollow Men,' came up," and I read the poem to her and explained the connections. Mr. Kurtz, he dead. And she was asked to look at a passage from Heart of Darkness. As I said, we're in the end game now. It might be tomorrow, it might be months away, but make no mistake, it's the end game in Harare and in Khartoum and in Kinshasa, in my view. Ramaphosa calls for lifting of sanctions on Zimbabwe, but he didn't pony up the cash, did he? He was asked for $1.2 billion. He's not going to throw good money after money gone bad, is he? He said Zimbabwe's situation was a challenge for the whole of Africa, and he planned to meet its President Emerson Mnangagwa at a later stage. South African all shares up 2.54% this year. Dollar versus Rand, 13.9715. Nigerian all share down 2.21% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 2.53% year to date. Kenya is seeking proposals for the issuance of a $2.5 billion Eurobond. Engaging with lenders over a plan to issue a $2.5 billion Eurobond denominated either in euros or dollars. I'd go for dollars. I'd go for euros because I think the euro is headed lower, so you've got to repay back less, plus the interest rate's so low. A banking source said on Wednesday. They want to assess whether it would be cheaper to borrow in euros or dollars. A number of banks submitted their interest last week, their technical capabilities. You know, we've seen a change in the US around interest rates. I think that's a lull. It's like, you know, those Hallison days. It's not going to last forever. And therefore, this is a window of opportunity for EM and frontier issuers, sovereign issuers, because, you know, everyone trades off the US 10-year or the US 30-year. So that rally has brought rates lower. Nairobi all shares had a strong start to the year. It's up 3.43% this year. The NSE 20 is up 1.3%. And the final link on Rich Wrap-Ups allows you to dive into any listed share at the stock exchange. Once again, I thank you for stopping by. I'm always grateful.